everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Well, appreciate the claps already. Thank you. Hopefully we get those at the end of the night as well. So welcome to our kind of water event. For those that don't know, I'm Dalton Rice, the city manager for City of Kerrville. We do have some council members in the audience, and appreciate everybody coming out to discuss obviously a very important topic. For those that know me, I got a quick poll that I kind of want to do and get some feedback, and I want y'all to kind of look around as we do this, because I think it provides some interesting perspectives as we're doing this. So if I could get a show of hands, who is here from the City of Kerrville, who lives in the City of Kerrville? Okay, who lives in the county? Okay, so that's about kind of what our poll is showing. So now, if you've lived here for 50 years or longer, raise your hand. Okay, there's one in the back. 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. So think about it as we're going through this. If the people at 50 years would have shut the doors, most of us wouldn't be here today. So as we go through this process, and we just got the numbers today, we're growing about 0.7 to 1% a year here in the City of Kerrville or Kerr County, if you will. Counties typically grow a little bit faster. So as we're going through this, be cognizant and be aware, we all moved here for a reason, and those are reasons that we have to take into consideration and keep an open mind as we're doing this. But the city is really trying to take a proactive look at all of this. So tonight, we're going to go through the survey results, introductions. We're going to have some interactive activities. We want to get y'all involved even more than just the survey. Hopefully everybody here took the survey. If not, you'll still have an opportunity to answer some questions. And we're going to really dive into this for a couple hours. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to CONSOR, who is our firm that we're working with to develop this strategic communications plan, Catherine and Martin. So thank you.
Thank you, Dalton. So my name is Catherine Sapasi, and I am a water engineer, but most importantly, I am a graduate of Tybee High School. So this is extraordinary that I see you guys all here, and this is so near and dear to my heart because it impacts my parents who still live here. My co-pilot is Martin Bartlett. He is the Senior Public Involvement Manager, but really what that means is he's the water communications expert. He'll be 20 years as a Texan tomorrow. Next weekend. So he is one of us. So we are CONSOR. CONSOR is an engineering and construction firm. We have over 1,700 employees throughout the nation, including Canada, but we have 10 offices in Texas. We are local within Central Texas, also in North Texas. We're all around Texas in general. We specialize in water, transportation, construction management, structural assessment, but the reason why we're here is we also specialize in strategic planning and communications. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Martin.
Thanks to Catherine, and thanks to all of you for being here and for participating in what I think is a very interesting process that is going to kind of illuminate some of the conversations that this community and many communities across the state and frankly across the country are having about water. I do want to just go back and kind of double down on what Catherine said. I am not an engineer. I do not even play one on television. I do, though, have the privilege of getting to spend time talking about technical concepts and how can we have a conversation around these technical concepts that live in the terms of concrete and steel and millions of gallons per day and bring them home to something that we can all relate to. And I think that it's hard to imagine something more relatable than creating a sustainable water future for a community like Kerrville. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and be with you this evening. Again, a little bit about why we're here tonight. The City of Kerrville has heard loud and clear that sustainable water resources need to be at the very top of the city's priority list. And because we know, you don't have to be a technical expert to know that water resources don't stop at the city limits and they don't stop at the county line. So the approach that we're taking is trying to take a broad, holistic view and get a broad understanding of what that more sustainable water future might look like. And again, to reiterate what Dalton said, we want to hear from you. We have several opportunities tonight for you to get engaged. And if you haven't already taken our 6-question survey, we would encourage you to either scan the QR code on these cards or on the posters you saw in the front. We also have paper versions as well, but we really do truly want to hear from you this evening and into the future. We also are big believers in not reinventing the wheel. Who in this room, I'm going to also mimic Dalton and say, show of hands, who in this room participated in the Kerrville 2050 comp plan process? I see lots of hands going up, and that is exciting because we know from that process that then sustainably meeting future water demands was a top priority of participants who participated in that process. And also one of the plan's guiding principles was how do we expand ongoing education efforts regarding those water issues? So said another way, how do we talk about water in a way that we can all understand, that we can all find some commonality on? At CONSOR, we are very fortunate to work with communities across the country and across the state of Texas on framing conversations in a way that, again, are relatable and understandable. If we come up here and spout off nothing but gallons and aquifers and pipes and concrete, that is not altogether interesting to everyone in the room. Some of us, I know it's very interesting too, but not all of us. So how do we broaden that conversation to have that more holistic conversation about water? And how do we inspire collective action? Because again, this is not about what does the City of Kerrville say you have to do. This is about what can we all do together to build that future that we all want. And also finding those solutions that align with community values and council goals. So this is where we're going to take a brief pause, and this is one of the first opportunities we have to hear from those of you in the room. If you have your smartphone, what I'm going to ask you to do is pull it out, point it up at the screen, open the camera function, and when you point it towards that QR code, you should see, if you're on an iPhone, a little yellow link appear. Go ahead and click that link for me, if you don't mind. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes for everybody to get situated. What I will also say, if you don't have a smartphone, we still want to hear from you. A lot of the questions in this exercise are on the survey, and we'll have paper versions of the survey later this evening, if that's your preferred method. So again, I'm going to give it just a couple more minutes. I still see a few phones up in the air. All right. Bear with me. We're going to switch over to a cool tool called Mentimeter, which is a very fun, interactive way to discuss in real time and to share results in real time. And the first question we're going to ask, I mean, it has something to do with water, but not directly to do with water in the way that we're all thinking about it tonight. But it is a question that will help us all get oriented to the tool and maybe learn a little something about those of us in the room. And for this question, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.
I love that you guys are already choosing. So, which is your iced tea preference? We have all spoken at the sign-in table that it was quite hot today, and it's just going to get hotter. It's hello summer, so iced tea is the way to cool off. It seems that unsweetened is actually the winner here, with flavored tea as a close second. I'm not even a close second. I would say unsweet.
So again, kind of a funny exercise, but again, just to get you acclimated to the tool, how it works, and that you can see the results in real time. I will say I am a little bit surprised that flavored tea came in second, but we will now move on to something perhaps a little bit more on target with the conversation for this evening. We're curious to know which of the following best describes you, and it looks like many of you have already answered this question. What is it that brought you here tonight? And we see many of you, by the way, I should share, on this question, you can answer as many times as you like. You can pick all 5, you can pick 1, you can pick none. So we do see, obviously, most of us are residents of Kerrville, Kerr County, or the Hill Country, handful of local business owners, local business decision makers, elected officials as well. And then we also see a lot of dots showing up there on being interested in what's being done to ensure a sustainable water supply, and also interested in preserving natural resources here in the Hill Country. So we're going to give this one a couple more minutes as a few more dots start to show up.
This question was taken directly from the survey. And so the question is, which of the following should be the City of Kerrville's #1 priority? And we have keep water rates affordable, be a good steward of ratepayer dollars, deliver clear, great tasting tap water, to ensure adequate supply for non-essential uses like irrigation, even in drought conditions, manage, we're right now 50-50 between manage water resources and infrastructure to meet the needs of growing community, protect natural resources, or to address operational challenges faced by water systems across this country, including aging infrastructure. Overwhelmingly, manage water resources and infrastructure to meet the needs of a growing community. But we'll give it some time. Martin will speak later about this in the presentation, because since this was directly taken from the survey, and it's interesting that here in this room, that it seems that manage water resources and infrastructure to meet the needs of a growing community is a clear winner.
So I'm going to go back to this one for a quick second. I see a couple more folks maybe still have to enter their results, but this is why we do this, and this is why I think it's very interesting. Remember this number. Remember that in this room, more than half of us say managing water resources and infrastructure to meet the needs of a growing community is #1. What I will also say is take a look at the item right above it that just got up to 3%, ensuring an adequate supply for non-essential uses like irrigation, even in drought conditions. Just remember those two things, because we're going to come back to those points a couple of times. But again, very interesting to see where we in this room fall on those two topics. All right. Couple more questions, also drawn directly from the survey, this one. We want to kind of understand what tools a local government should use, in your opinion. Do you agree that to meet the challenges of providing a continuing supply into the future, the city should a local government rather, should seek to manage growth to ensure that current water sources meet those future demands? Should a local government invest or innovate? Should a local government more tightly regulate non-essential water uses? So again, you'll see, and a lot of y'all have already got this, a slider on your phone for each of those options. So you're just going to slide all the way to the left to say you strongly disagree, you don't think that's the role of a local government, or all the way to the right, you are absolutely all in on that is what a local government needs to do to help create a more sustainable water future. So I think we still have a few more folks that have to enter in their feedback. So I'll give y'all just a moment. All right, a few more results kind of keep coming in, but I will say again, this is another very interesting, in this case, not really a departure from what we're going to talk about in the future. This actually aligns very closely to what we saw in the survey results that we'll dive into here in a little bit later in the evening.
And this one I'm very excited about, because it just shows how overwhelmingly water is such an important topic to the City of Kerrville and the county, and it's wonderful. So how many survey responses do you guess that we've gotten? I'm going to give it a little bit time, because it's going to come up with the actual number. I
gotta say, I see some of little faith.
I'm still going to wait, because I want it to be like, whoa, wow. Okay, are you ready? Drum roll, please. Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
There we go.
850 responses. So that really tells you how important water is to this community.
So again, kind of a fun way to gauge the opinions and thoughts of those of us in the room and to get us all thinking about water. And in most of those cases, of course, there was no right or wrong answer. But we do know for the folks who are charged with making sure that the City of Kerrville does deliver water today, tomorrow, and decades into the future, there are some clear right answers. And so we have a video that we're going to share directly from the City of Kerrville, really talking about the importance of having a diversified portfolio of water resources and what we as citizens, whether we're in Kerrville or not, can do to prolong our water resources as effectively as possible. So again, later this evening, we're going to have more information on the actual survey responses themselves. We are going to have an opportunity for some moderated Q&A, but first we're going to begin our Water 101 section with a video that I hope y'all enjoy.
Good morning, my name is Stuart Barron. I'm the Executive Director of Public Works and Engineering for the City of Kerrville. As part of my job responsibilities is managing the city's water supply, along with a lot of other capable people. The Texas Hill Country is said to be an area of continuous drought with occasional flooding. Well, we've seen a lot more drought lately than we've seen flooding. And what we're here today to talk about is our water supply and what we can do to prolong our water supply and how we're going to manage that in the future. Luckily, our citizens have been very good about conservation. Conservation is the most important piece of our water management for us. Follow our drought stages, and they do what the city, for the most part, do what the city is asking them to do. So you may say, how much water does the city use every day, and where does it come from? Currently, we use around 3 million gallons a day. That water comes from 4 different sources. One is the run-of-the-river water. That's the water that's flowing over the dam right now. The white water you see behind me in the state of Texas says that we can take that out at a certain volume at a certain time of the year. Another source of water is Nimitz Lake itself, which is the ponding water behind the dam. We have about 840 acre-feet of water that we can use back there during drier times, and we can pump that all the way down, and that's water that's allocated to the state or permitted to the City of Kerrville from the state. A third source of water is ASR water. We take the surface water, treat in excess of what we need during these colder months like we are today, and we'll store it down in an aquifer to the tune of about 500,000 to 1.5 million gallons a day, depending on what demand is. And then we store it and pull that back out when the river flow isn't as high as it is. Then our fourth source of water is groundwater. It looks just like our ASR system, but it's actually pumping native groundwater, and we're permitted by the Headwaters District as to how much water we can pump. A fifth source of water that's non-potable is called our reuse pond, and it's over on Spur 98. We have about 98 million gallons of water stored in there. The reason that's important to the city is that for every gallon of reuse water that those customers use is groundwater that we're conserving. So we use the water that comes out of our wastewater plant, we clean it, treat it to a quality of water that you can put on your golf courses, you can put on your playing fields, you can put on your ball fields, and you can grow grass with it. It's perfect for that. And we don't have to demand on groundwater for that. So that's kind of the sources that the city uses. We've all worked together to build all this infrastructure and all these components. Knowing that conservation is the highest and best practice for us, we still build the rest of this system so that we can continue to live here during these droughts. So with that, we ask that you continue to conserve so that our families and our children can continue to live here as long as they want. Thank you.
So with that, we had Stuart on video. Now we have Stuart in real life to take a deeper dive into Kerrville Water 101 and Texas Water 101.
Thank you, Martin. Now you'll be able to hear me stumble over my words in person. Try to get the marbles out of my mouth for this. So that was a little taste of where the water is, what types of water the City of Kerrville has. I'm going to tell you where how we've gotten there. In the past, in 2008, the city adopted a wastewater master plan. That was the first real plan that we had for the City of Kerrville, and it didn't link itself much to source water. It was more about how our utility function of supplying, actually getting the water from the river to the house, or from the well to the house, and then the individuals using that and getting the wastewater back to our wastewater treatment plant and to discharge it back into the river. So that was just a functional piece of the utility. Later on, we decided, hey, you know, we need to look into source water. Where's our source water coming from? What are the additional sources that we're not taking advantage of out in the community or out in the environment? So in 2020, the city adopted, or actually paid for, a long-range water plan. In that water plan, we looked at about 13 different options of additional water for the city of Kerrville. Those options were mainly, they revolved around about, well, there was 13 different ones. The first ones were a little bit more about like remote well fields. I think some of the, actually number 2 and 3. The first one was conservation. Number 2 and 3 were about groundwater, developing the Ellenberger Aquifer here in the city. The third one was the remote well field. And we also had additional ASR capacity. We looked at area lakes as a good idea to put a water line into an area lake. Developing our reuse system, treating reuse to drinking water, different things like that. All of them were evaluated. There was only one fatal flaw in the different options that we looked at, and that was using the gravel pits in West Kirk County. That turned out to be a non-starter for us, so we abandoned that idea. As we looked at all that, we understood those pieces of it, and we found out that conservation really is going to be our best effort in finding additional water. There's nothing new out there. There's no new sources. Water is limited in our area, and you're just not going to turn under a stone and say, hey, here's all the water you need. It just doesn't exist. So conservation of what we have and understanding it really is key. So we looked at how much water are we using? How much does each one of our water customers use? This is the state average. You can see on here that the city of Kerrville is shown in the blue line. It's gallons per capita. We go back from 2010 to 2023. The trend line there, the green line, is kind of the state average. These are state numbers. They're not generated by the city. Matter of fact, we don't even agree with all of them. As of in 2024, our gallons per capita was about 139 gallons per person for the city. So we're trending down a little bit from there. You can see the population is in the bar graphs, and it didn't go up in Kerrville in 2020 and come down in 21. So there's some softening. They're again state numbers, but the most recent number is 139 gallons per person. So as we look through that, we have all of these long-range ideas in our long-range water plan. The state really likes for communities to do that because they put it in the local plan. They build all those local plans across every community in the state, and that we participate in a region, which is ours is Region J. There's forgotten how many regions. I think there's 23 regions across the city, or excuse me, across the state. The state takes all that information, they put it in the long range or the state water plan. See what you have here. So they do this every 5 years. State updates those, and you're eligible for funding if you actually have your plan or your project in this plan. So they do that. The ones that made it in there were in for our particular city. We're exploring and developing groundwater wells, increase purification of reuse water, increase aquifer storage and recovery, fix leaky pipes across our connection. Luckily, we don't have very many of those, not like some communities do. And then the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, this is the conservation plan. This is when we're in a drought. The state also requires us to have a series of measures we used in drought stages to conserve water, so when our water supply starts to diminish, we know what we're going to do to implement those. So Senator Perry had a comment that was very astute to the state in general. It says, we've developed all the cheap water and all the low-hanging fruit has been obtained. Again, that's his way of saying there's really no more water that's available out there. We're using what we have. Conservation is the key. We're going to be looking for different sources. Something that new that's happened this year is the state of Texas actually approved some money in 2023 for the water board to spend on projects. They're also considering setting up a fund where they fund it yearly for the next 6 years. That hasn't passed yet, but they're considering that. So the state sees this problem. They see it as a statewide issue. Just as we're seeing this as a city and a county-wide issue, we all are in this together, and we have to continue to be smart on our water use. With that, I'll turn it back to Mark. Forwarded one too many.
No, not at all, not at all. So, you know, the reality is that is a very high level look at the way the city manages water, at the way the state asks local communities to manage water. But we did want to just take a brief moment, a brief pause here, and this is another opportunity to get some feedback from all of you. So when you came in at the sign-in table, we had some question sheets. If you picked up one of those, take a moment to jot down any questions you have. We have additional question sheets here at the front. What I would encourage you to do is come on down to the front, fill out the question sheets, and drop those in the box. And later in the evening, once we've gone through some of the survey results, some of the interesting findings that we've seen, we would love to take a moment to ask some of our panel of experts who will be sitting in those chairs a bit later this evening, some of the questions directly from those in the audience. We want to make sure we have a broad-ranging set of questions and that we're able to get through as many of them as possible. So we'll probably spend about 15 minutes to half an hour, depending on how long it takes to run through the survey results, asking the questions of folks on our panel. So again, feel free to come on down, take a moment, fill out the question sheets, and we'll be happy to reconvene here in about, we'll call it 10, 15 minutes. I just want to resume by saying what a fantastic participation we got and what really great, insightful questions. So I got to say thank you to all of you in the room for providing such great questions. And you know, those that we are not able to answer tonight that may be a little more technical in nature, we'll work to get you an answer. But we do just want to make sure we get through as many of the questions that we can answer tonight as possible. But I will say thank you. That is going to be very valuable as we continue to work and continue to understand the community's needs, priorities, and wants into the future. So this to me is where we get into some really, really fun stuff. Some of the results of the surveying we've done. I do have to begin with a disclaimer. What you see on your screen is a snapshot of what some folks were doing on, I presume, a sunny Sunday afternoon 110 years ago on the banks of the Guadalupe River. Just like that is a snapshot of that moment in time, of what those folks were up to, what we're about to provide you is just a snapshot. It is not a scientific study, but it does provide some interesting feedback, an interesting snapshot of the community's ideas and attitudes as they stand right now. All right, so how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we have these 850 survey responses? Well, it all began with launching a survey back on April 26th that is, to be very candid, still open. We worked, though, to get as many of the responses in the first 2 weeks as possible. We worked with the city to promote via social media, via this card, which you may have seen around town with a QR code on it, flyers that we handed out at Louise Hayes Park a couple weeks ago, a stakeholder toolkit that was emailed, and also via traditional media via a press release. What we thought was very important was to keep this survey brief. 6 questions is what we asked. You know, I have participated in surveys that went on and on and on. And despite the best intentions, people tend to, as I certainly did, tend to tune out. So we wanted to take the best, or get the greatest hits quickly and efficiently. And so that's what we tried to do with our 6-question survey. And so we're going to run through the results of those 6 questions. Again, not scientific, but we think illustrative. First off, before we really got into the questions, we wanted to understand, where did our respondents live? Not terribly surprising. 2/3 of them were from inside the city limits, or said they were from inside the city limits. 1/3 said they were from outside of the city limits, but still in Kerr County. 4%, not sure how they found us, but 4% of the respondents were outside of Kerr County. If you were inside Kerrville or you were inside Kerr County, we let you keep going. If you were answering the survey from Houston or Dallas or Fredericksburg, your survey experience ended there because we really wanted to understand what were the very local attitudes. So what you're going to see are results from, again, folks who live within Kerr County or within the city limits of Kerrville. And one of the first questions we asked was a ranking question, very similar to one we all did together earlier. Rather than just asking what's the number one priority on this, the way we asked it in the online survey was rank these in order, 1 to 7. 1 is the single biggest priority you think the city of Kerrville should have. Number 7, you could take it or leave it. Doesn't really matter to you. So let's dive in and start taking a look at some results. I will add the caveat, on some of these pie charts, it may not total 100 because of rounding, so just want to get that out there. What we heard on this comprehensive look at the top priority from those who responded to the survey was fully a third said protecting natural resources should be the city of Kerrville's number one priority. Second to that, managing water resources and infrastructure for a growing community. What I found really interesting beyond that, and in conversations with our team, was look at where ensuring adequate supply for non-essential uses, including irrigation during drought, comes in. It was very rarely listed as a top priority. Again, what you saw was listed as a top priority was protection of natural resources, which I think says something about the longevity of the conversation this community is interested in having and willing to have. This is about what was here before we got here, what we hope to leave for our kids and our grandkids, and what we hope to leave for their kids and their grandkids. This is, again, the combined Kerr County, Kerrville result. Very little difference when you just drill down to the city of Kerrville. A difference as well when you dive into just the Kerr County results. But again, in all cases, protecting natural resources was number 1. Managing water resources and infrastructure for a growing community came in second. And regardless of how you sliced it or diced it, that idea of ensuring an adequate supply on the hottest day in the summer to make sure you can water your yard when it's 110 in August, that was just rarely what bubbled up as a top priority. And this is also a very interesting data point. So once we determined what were the top priority of those respondents, we want to know, do you think the city of Kerrville is doing something, based upon your knowledge, to achieve that goal? If your number one goal is making sure that, or believe the city of Kerrville's number one goal should be preserving natural resources, based on what you know, is the city of Kerrville doing anything to achieve that? And what we found here is, in the city and in the county, there is a sentiment that the city of Kerrville is not undertaking actions to achieve that number one priority. And that gives us kind of 2 messages we took away from that. First, this could be an opportunity for more alignment in the actual initiatives that are taking place. This could also be an opportunity to refine the conversation we're having with the community. I think you could credibly argue there is a lot of work the city of Kerrville is doing to preserve natural resources. Look at ASR, look at what we saw that the effect of water conservation programs were. It, however, is not landing with folks, clearly, at least those who responded, as an effective way to conserve natural resources going forward. So again, some actions we could take there. All right, another question, one we did together as well, this agree question. What do you agree a local government could or should do? Manage growth, innovate and invest, more tightly regulate non-essential water uses. So what we really focused in next was the somewhat agree and the strongly agree number in both of those. Whether you are all in or you're just mostly in, we wanted to say, you agree. This is something that you're on board with. And what we saw was, kind of going through each of these, a lot of agreement in the city and the county that the city of Kerrville, or local governments, including the city of Kerrville, should work more to manage growth to ensure current water sources meet future water needs. So that is a very popular or a very agreeable idea, but we do have to recognize that we are in the state of Texas, and municipalities are limited sometimes in what they can do to manage growth because of the importance that is placed upon private property rights and development rights here in Texas. So again, this is something that we know there's a lot of agreement on, but is this maybe the most viable alternative? That's a conversation to have going forward. All right, another item. Do you agree that innovating and investing, you agree that local governments should innovate and invest in new and existing water sources to meet future demand? Very strong agreement from within the City of Kerrville, also strong agreement from respondents outside of the city and the county. So again, a lot of agreement with this idea of innovation and investment. So perhaps more innovation and investment around ASR, more innovation and investment around reuse. And this was one of the few places where we actually saw more of a divide from our respondents in the city and our respondents in the county. This idea of tighter regulation of non-essential water uses, including irrigation during drought conditions. So while we heard very clearly in some of the earlier questions, ensuring that I can go out there and water on a 110-degree day in August is not the #1 priority, this is not quite as popular a place where the respondents would want to see that local governments invest their time and energies. But what I will say is, in the open-ended responses that we'll take a look at in a moment, it did come up very loud and very clear, some items specifically related to maybe enforcement of existing rules that are on the books. We also just kind of were curious, do folks understand where their water comes from? It is very typical in communities for folks to understand, I turn on the tap, the water comes out, and that's all there is to it. Of course, we all know there's a lot more to it than that. So we were very interested to see that high-performing correct answers included the Guadalupe River. Folks know that's a place where this community gets its drinking water, and it is hard to imagine something that does a better job of advertising for itself than the river. But also, the ASR program, again, a very technical program, a very innovative program. We heard a lot of understanding that that was a source for drinking water in the community, or a source for water in the community, very clearly, very highly understood. What we did find on the other side, though, folks not particularly aware of other groundwater sources, existing aquifers, kind of in that mix that you saw earlier in the video Stuart provided. Some other interesting highlights, we did get some kind of extraneous incorrect answers, but what we think is very telling, almost a third of people who answered said they just plain didn't know where their water came from. And that is not to castigate anybody for not knowing. That lets us know there's work to be done. We need to make sure folks in the community understand where water comes from. And again, I think Catherine and I have very different lenses on how we communicate about those things, but we want to make sure that we are assisting with a conversation that is both technically accurate, but also approachable and understandable. So that was question 4. Question 5 is a standard question we ask in communities across the country where we do this type of work. 1 to 7, how do you rate the water that's supplied to your home? Good news, you're above average in the eyes of the consumer. So that's a very exciting data point as well. We had an opportunity to just say, look, we've asked some questions of you. We want to know what else out there is on your mind about our shared water future and water resource today and into the future. We would be here all night and into tomorrow if we went through each of those many different questions, or rather responses we received. What we did was we pulled together what's called a word cloud. The bigger the word, the more often it showed up in those open-ended responses. No surprise, the star of the show, of course, there in dark blue in the middle is water. What we did also see emerging, though, is you see development showed up strong. You also see conservation showing up strong. Planning, another item that came up. And what I will specifically draw you to are the 2 words there in the upper left side, lawns. There was a lot of talk about existing regulations and enforcement of existing regulations. So there does seem to be an appetite, at least from the folks that we heard from, the respondents to this survey, to make sure that if we're going to be in a situation where there are rules and regs in place for when I can and when I should water, there does seem to be an appetite for tighter enforcement of those rules and regs. So the takeaways. What do we do with all these answers to all these questions? what we found interesting was that protecting natural resources bubbled to the top as a priority, regardless of where people were answering our survey. Whether you lived right in town or you lived out at the edge of the county line, chances are protecting natural resources is a theme of a conversation that's going to resonate. And again, that tells us this is a conversation, not a right here, right now question, or not a right here, right now conversation that needs to be had hair on fire, but rather a long-term conversation about a generational approach that we can take to making sure that, again, what was here when we got here is here when we leave for our kids and our grandkids. Overall, there was a lot of agreement on the possible potential approaches to creating that sustainable water future. You know, we did see some division in the city and the county, for example, on certain regulations. We did see a lot of agreement on some things that may not be particularly viable or feasible, given the fact that we are within the state of Texas and private property rights are held in such high regard. But at the end of the day, there was not some major divide between city and county, and also a lot of agreement within the folks that we heard from in our survey as well. All told, the biggest takeaway that we found was that there is still work to be done to facilitate better alignment and better understanding between the City of Kerrville's initiatives and community priorities. So I really want to unpack that statement because it is two-layered in my opinion. Not only can we facilitate better alignment between the initiatives and the priorities, but also facilitate that alignment between the initiatives which are presently underway that do achieve those community priorities and make sure the community fully understands what work is being done, what initiatives the city is undertaking to achieve those things that we all agree on. And so as Stuart said, in the world, there is no new water. It is a finite resource here, there, everywhere. It's a finite resource. So what can we do? We think being right there at the crossroads, right there at that star, is incredibly important. Conservation and awareness, collaboration, working together across jurisdictional lines, and strategically developing resources is a place the City of Kerrville is poised to go and is the road forward to make sure that we do create that sustainable water future for the Hill Country that we know is so important to this community and communities, again, across the state and across the country who are having a similar conversation. So with that, I'm going to invite our panelists to come on up, and we will go ahead and ask, how many questions did we come to?
So there were a number of questions that touched on the same topic. If you feel that you do not have your question answered, they will be answered, maybe just not in the time given. But I'm going to count. I should have counted. 5, 6, 7.
7, all right. So we have 7 discrete questions that came out. So what we'll do is we'll
This one I think is, I'm just going to, the first one we're going to is a minor question, but I think it's a good clarification for everyone in the room.
Right. So she was just saying that the first question is kind of a clarification of something we presented earlier, but then we'll maybe dive into some of the more water resources questions as well. So, all right, they appeared. I asked for them to appear, and they appeared. I appreciate that. All right. First question first. The video that we showed that was, I believe, used in the State of the City 2024, I believe, showed that the city was in stage 2. Aren't we in stage 3? Can you kind of explain where we are right now in the drought stages?
So yeah, the city is currently in stage 3 drought stages. The video was dated a little bit from an earlier presentation. That's why that came out there.
Perfect. So again, just to clarify, the city is currently today, as we sit here on May 20th, 2025, in stage 3.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next question. So what should the local response be to people who say absolutely no growth should be allowed? We touched on earlier, there are complications given our geography to taking a hardline approach on absolutely no growth.
So I'm going to kind of put some data sets in here, and I'm going to let Stuart and David kind of talk through the water piece of it. But as I kind of stated earlier, we're growing 0.78 to 0.87 to 1% in the city of Kerrville. As a perspective, City of Boerney's growing at 5.5%, county's growing probably 0.5% faster than the city's growing. So under we'll call it current trends across the state, we are growing at a very manageable rate compared to other cities that are experiencing high growth. We are not growing very fast.
So I add on to that. So the state, the state of Texas is a property rights state. Everybody has the right to do or develop their property as they see fit, as long as they comply with our regulations. And what we're looking for is quality growth, sustainable growth. We don't want to grow outside of we don't want to grow for the sake of growth. I don't think anybody's interested in that, but we have to allow people to come in. There's no way to close the door.
So kind of that idea as well of what are the ways to ensure that high quality growth, recognizing that growth may not be something that can be stopped. You can't draw a line in the sand, but what do we do when that growth, when that development takes place to make sure that it aligns with water conservation goals?
Either way.
So kind of with that question, how do we, manage it? City Council does a great job. City Councils over the years have prepared for it. I think with our water system, which these gentlemen can talk much more about that than I can, they've prepared for that, which is why we as a city are better poised in the water world compared to other cities that are on single sources. So when you look at capacity, when you look at demand, when you look at use, when you look at infrastructure, all of these things the City of Kerrville and previous city councils have thought about and have taken into consideration and have had the forethought and the foresight to look 5, 10, 15 years past, whether that's from the master plans or from the infrastructure piece. And all of that stuff you can look at Texas Water Development Board. You can look at the again our water plan. What our team is constantly doing is thinking about that. The other thing is we fall under a CCN, a Certificate of Convenience and Necessity. So if you are in the city limits of Kerrville, we have to provide you services. We don't have a choice. So how we can manage that is through development agreements. We work with these developers that are in the city limits already to figure out how do we find that balance of managed growth with services that we do have to provide. And so I think that's a good starting point.
Here's a question on how many housing units do we know that are currently in the pipeline to come online in the future? Do we have that number? And that would include commitments the city has made to provide taps for future service. And maybe if not the number, kind of what is the process for making sure that the development goals align with what water resources are available?
So the number fails me right now because they're at all different stages. They're all different stages of development. We have people that have come in and kind of kicked the tires on a piece of property and ask us, "Hey, what's the city's opinion about doing this kind of development on this property?" All the way up to, "Hey, they're ready to pull building permits." And so I don't have a number for you, and it's very. Yep.
You can finish.
But that. As we follow that strategy along, I can tell you probably about 80% of the developments that come to the city don't happen. When they come in and they're kicking tires and say, "Hey, what did these lots look like to you, or what are the infrastructure needs? What do y'all think about developing this piece of property?" I would say it's between 80 and 90% of them really don't happen.
Yeah, so on some of the numbers, and this is loose, so don't hold me to it, but roughly it's about 1,100 units over the next 5 to 7 years, give or take. So Lennar Homes, the second phase, is going to be about 490 homes. They're looking at putting about 62 homes a year in. That'll start either next year or the year after, depending, and that'll take 5 years-ish. Current Lennar just finished, and that's 130 homes, so they were averaging about 62 homes a year. There's a multifamily complex going up now. That's going to be about 280 units. That'll finish next year. Based off of the housing study, that's not official yet, but it's roughly about 2,500 homes total over the next 10 plus years. So that's factoring in 10, 15 years. Depending on the year, in that housing study, there's a really good matrix on there that shows there's some years that we've put 0 homes in, and then last year I think we put about 120 units in. We currently in the city have about, I think we looked at the number today, 11,523 units in the city. So units is a dwelling that somebody occupies, and we average based off of per capita household is about 2.21 people. So we were looking at population data today. So in order for us to factor in the growth, and again, 0.78% is not a lot, that'll be over the span of time.
I think we talk a lot about residential development. There are also big industrial users that might be interested in moving to town. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what are the guidelines the city looks at, or the metrics the city looks at before approving maybe a high water use industrial development?
Yeah, I mean, really, high water use, what defines high water use? Most people don't know in the city we have dead end mains, and these gentlemen can talk much more about the technical side, but we really probably offload, 26 million gallons a year in those dead end mains? Give or take, so 26 million gallons. So what that means is if we have a dead end main, in order to keep the chemicals and everything right, and mind you, I'm not a water guy, so layman terms here, we have to open up a valve in the middle of 110-degree heat with a drought, with no rain, and dump water right onto the ground. We don't have a choice. TCEQ says we have to do it, to the tune of 26 million gallons a year. Now, some would argue, well, why don't we loop the system? Well, we could, but it costs money. Who's going to pay for it? And so there's a balance between the development, there's a balance between those utilizers coming in. Some could argue and say, well, Megacrete, which is a concrete company that's coming in, is a high utilizer. Well, there'll be potentially a high utilizer over the course of time, but they're going to be a consumer that adds some revenues onto that system versus having to potentially dump some of that water onto the ground. And so as we're looking at development, and we've worked with UGRA, we're working with different groups, we've spoken at a lot of conferences, adding conservation into development is also a key thing. A lot of these developments can factor in conservation or reuse or different types of methodologies that lower water use. I don't know if you guys want to add on to that, but we really, overall, we're not sitting out there targeting high utilizers. Because again, we have to balance also the economy. We're not just factoring just water. Megacrete, for example, while they, over time they're going to add, uses to the water, they're only bringing in 60 to 70 jobs. We just got our unemployment rate is 2.8%. So we know we need housing. We have a true economic train here. And so you're going to start, you'll see hiring signs, people are needing work, and we're kind of a self-licking ice cream cone. We're going to poach off of people for those that need jobs. So until we get some housing, appropriate housing, we're going to see that unemployment rate kind of stabilize out well under the national and the state average, which some might look at that as a good thing, but for economists, we don't look at that as a good thing because we know that there's a workforce that needs to be had.
Let me touch just a minute on the dead end mains that he talked about and the requirement by the state. So we do flush that, the 26 million gallons a year comes out of the ends of our mains. The state requires us to actually have chlorine in our water at all of our service points. Well, chlorine is not a very stable chemical, and as it diminishes in the water system, we have to allow that water out of the main to get chlorine residual back in there. So that's what we do out of our water system. That 26 million gallon number, just so you'll know, on an average winter day, the city uses about 3 million gallons a day. On a day like this past weekend, we used about 4.5 million gallons a day, just to give you some amount of reference there.
These next couple of questions kind of go to this idea of water conservation as an always-on factor, not something that we just do in the middle of the summer or that we just do in a drought. What specific water conservations does the city implement independent of any drought stage declaration? So even on a cold day in February when it's not particularly high water usage, what is the city doing to make sure that water is being conserved?
Right, so there's year-round conservation measures, or if you will, best practices, right? So those are in our water conservation plan. So as Stuart mentioned in that slide earlier, there are certain plans that we do follow. So it is a year-round conservation efforts. We plan on ramping up our educational outreach as it pertains to year-round conservation. I don't mean year-round as in a stage, but more of continuous education. I think that's a big part of it as we go towards conservation.
And sometimes it's that passive conservation element of more efficient fixtures in your home. You know, those things have a really big impact. So whether you're brushing your teeth for 5 minutes with one fixture versus another is still conservation.
Right. There's tons of stuff that we can touch on. One of them is irrigation, right? It's education on irrigating in the summertime, also irrigation systems in the wintertime. How do you shut them off? Make sure that they're not overspraying, or make sure that everything is functioning properly and sort of winterizing your system so you don't have any leaks. So those are just examples of some year-round practices that we sort of convey to the public.
Hey, Martin, can you put that sweet graph, my favorite graph, up there real quick? Because I think this is important to talk about when we talk about what is the city doing as far as year-round conservation. And so just to orient people to...
It was so good, it broke the system.
It was so good. I'm so disappointed right now. Oh man, this is
Coming
why we
back to
can't have
life.
nice things. It's my fault.
There we go.
All right. So just kind of orient you to the map. The bar charts at the bottom show population growth since 2010. The blue line is the Texas Water Development Board numbers, which is actually higher than our numbers that we track. We know that there's a difference. We try to work with Texas Water Development Board on getting accurate data, but we don't know where they get their data from. And then the green line is really the slope, a linear slope of the average of that per capita use. And so I think it's really important to note that since 2010, at least what we're showing on here, we show a decrease in per capita use while an increase in population. And I think that's important to talk about. One of the things that we were trying to get some data on, just to show a comparison of this when you're solely using groundwater, or again, Texas Water Development Board plays a large role. We could not really find anything for just a groundwater district without having to really dive into the details, because there's a lot of exempt wells that aren't tracked, they're not metered. So with this data, even though this is on the higher end of what we're seeing on a per capita use, we are seeing a downward slope and a downward trend, even though our population is increasing. And we just ran the numbers today for 2025. We are unofficially over 25,000 population from what we're tracking. And so it's going to be interesting to see how we play this out. But conservation has been rooted in city council, in the community, at least since 2010 from what we're showing here.
Just, Martin, one more. If you're interested in conservation, please look at our website. There's a whole bunch of things, from native plants at a plant to, turning the water off when you brush your teeth, using floating pool toys out there to keep the evaporation in your pool down. All kinds of neat ideas, or you can Google search it. If you're interested in conservation, please do a little research and do your part.
So here's one that goes to that idea of water restrictions. So take it out of the year-round, more into, say, summertime in a drought restriction. Is there any opportunity for the city to get more proactive on enforcing water restrictions? When will we get more proactive on wastewater treatment for drinking, for direct potable reuse?
Okay, I guess we're going to start with me this time. I sat in the middle because I always like to have the last word, and they hand me back the microphone so I get to end too. So, but no, we talked about it actually earlier today with our HR department. We're looking at doing some temporary employees to help us ramp up our water effort for policing and enforcement. So we'll be doing that. We'll be working on that the remainder of the week, and next week we'll hopefully be able to get those guys and able to go out and do a little bit more genuine enforcement of those rules. A lot of the watering that we're seeing right now is on the weekends and in the middle of the night, and they're hard to catch, and so being at work during the day, it gets to be a little difficult. The second part of that comment, or the question, was about reuse water, and can you repeat that?
I mean, and not just, one of the things, all reuse is not created equal, so this is specifically reuse for potable use.
So one of the strategies that we talked about earlier today was, looking at our reuse water and trying to figure out how do we make it a potable water source. Now, the city of El Paso right now is actually doing that. They're going to a direct potable system. It's very costly, and The state has just now implementing the rules that they have to follow, or you have to follow to do that. There's some other strategies that we're considering right now. One is direct potable reuse. We don't have the reports back yet. We're looking at 3 different options currently for additional water supply. One's a remote well field here still in Kirk County. Option number 2 would be that direct potable reuse from using reuse water as a source water for the city. And then an indirect potable reuse, which has an environmental buffer, where we would take our reuse water and then put it possibly back in the river upstream of our water treatment plant, and have that mix with the river water, so you're not getting the whole just reuse water, it's mixing with the river. So we're evaluating those 3 options. We really believe that those probably are going to be the most reliable source of water for the future, and also the most cost-effective way for us to find additional water in the future. So we're afoot looking at those options.
I'm not going to be able to get back to it quickly enough, but I thought it kind of spoke to that idea of what Senator Perry was saying about all the low-hanging fruit is gone. All the cheap and easy options are not available. There is not some magical crystal lake that we've just not found or tapped into before. It really is. This is where the rubber's meeting the road.
Martin, you can quote me. There's no additional water. It's just,
right.
we got what you got.
There we go. Does the city have an active program to detect leaks?
Yes, so on some of the meters that are out there, they're able to detect any kind of leaks in the system, consumption that's kind of abnormal. And we do have a system where it does notify the residents if it's happening out there. We're continuously looking at innovation, which I like that one of the, I guess, favorite things was innovation, right, as it pertains to water. So that's smart metering is an innovation out there. So we're continuously looking for ways to improve our leak detection system, whether it's through meters or even different methods out in the field through fire hydrants. There's various methods, so we are continuously looking for improvements on that.
We've got, I think, 1 or 2 more. And then what I'd like to do is, if you'll indulge me, we can take some time to maybe head down on the floor, and we can all kind of have some one-on-one conversations as well, because we are a small group, so I think there's still plenty of room to go ahead and have some face-to-face conversations. This is a question that's near and dear to my heart as a gardener. As a member of the Native Plant Society of Texas and attending many Master Gardener and Master Naturalist lectures, why are the city, county, and the state not incentivizing more of the practices of decreasing lawns and increasing the use of native plants, water catchment methods, and in and out of home use, and getting builders to do the same?
I'll touch on that first, then pass it down. But I think that's part of growth, some of the recommendations on how do you mitigate the impacts to our water through growth, right? That's either certain landscaping recommendations and or requirements, or other systems that are in place in your development that, again, help mitigate the impacts of water.
I'm going to quote Stuart here real quick. No, obviously we talk about water quite often, and him and I had a conversation one day, and it really stuck with me. Conservation is easy, but alternatives are expensive. So when you start looking at trying to change it, unless you can get it on the new side of development, xeriscape or naturalscape or whatever, trying to do catchments, trying to do rain harvesting stuff, trying to do some of these alternatives, they can be costly, and not everybody can afford them. If you want to do a rain catchment, how many in the audience have done a quote on a rain catchment system for their house? Was it like $50,000 or more? About how much? Under $2,000? Y'all need to talk to this guy. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing something right. So, from the quotes that we've seen, it's expensive, and typically there's no return on investment. So you're looking at more of the wealthy populations that can do it versus conservation. Everybody can do.
This will, I think, be the last question we take in this part before we head on down and have some one-on-one conversations. Is there anything that can be done to soften our water at home? I know that.
Soften the water at home?
Yes.
I would say no.
Yes, so there's a whole bunch of sources you can do it. The City of Kerrville has, and the Guadalupe, we use about 80% of the water that we use out of the Guadalupe River. Fortunately or not, it still comes from a limestone aquifer. The Trinity is actually Edwards Trinity is where the water comes from out of the Guadalupe River. So it comes out of a limestone aquifer, which is really hard. The groundwater we have here is really hard. If you want soft water, you have to use a water softener from something you can get from like a Culligan or something like that. If you just want really good tasting water to drink, they make the point of uses that go into your sink. It's reverse osmosis. I actually have one at my home. I live out in the county. I like the way it makes the water taste. It takes all that out of there. So there are some point of use water treatments that you can use at your house. The reason that we don't use those at the city is because a big portion of our water gets used for irrigation or things that aren't being consumed, and so there's no reason for the community as a whole pay for that quality of clean water when it's more appropriate to do it at the point of use.
I just want to take a second again to thank these gentlemen, and I apologize, I did not introduce you all when you started. I have a feeling that we all probably know who we are in the room, but thank you all for your time this evening, your willingness to sit up here and let me ask you some questions. And thanks to all of you for really some great questions that I think informed an exciting conversation and will help us in the next steps of our process as well. I'm going to invite everybody, let's take a couple minutes, we'll work our way down, and please feel free, anybody with one of these name tags, we'd love to chat with you face to face and hear what you have to say. So thanks so much for joining us this evening, and we'll head on down.